Good evening and welcome to another episode of Cook Like a Rebel. We have a very special episode tonight because we are all invited to the Dean's dinner party tonight. And so we have a whole team of chefs in our kitchen here tonight. So it's going to be a very special night. But before we get started tonight, I want to make sure that we thank those who make all of this happen. First of all, I want to thank our Hospitality Alumni Chapter Board. I also want to thank Karen and our Alumni Engagement Committee. Also want to thank our staff, Maggie, Candace, and Caitlin, everybody who does so much for our faculty, our students, and our alumni. So thank you guys for everything that you do. So once again, in our kitchen tonight, in the Marriott Foundation kitchen, we have, first of all, we have Chef Steph. We also have Chef Mark Sandoval, who is our executive chef of Hospitality Hall there. And so you might remember him if you were with us on episode 1 a few weeks ago with Mark Sandoval. And then we have another person who probably needs no introduction here. He is the Dean of the Hospitality College, Dr. Stowe Shoemaker, and you'll see that he is wearing tonight a red chef's coat. And we started a tradition a few years ago in 2018 for our 50th anniversary and also the opening of Hospitality Hall of giving our graduates a red chef's coat. And you'll see that Dean Shoemaker is wearing that chef's coat tonight. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to hand it over to our chefs right now who are in the Marriott Foundation kitchen.
Good evening, everybody. It's really an honor to be here, and we appreciate you coming to look at Cook with a Rebel tonight. I'm really honored to be joined by my good friend and my sous chef for this evening, who's really the full chef here at the William Ifthe College of Hospitality, Chef Mark Sandoval. You'll probably notice that I'm wearing a red chef jacket, and my sous chef has a kind of a gray one. But one of the things that's really important that you all understand is since I've become dean, we instituted, when we moved into Hospitality Hall, what we call a red chef ceremony. And what we do is we give every graduating student a red chef jacket. And the reason for that is that even though our students may not go onto the culinary side of the business, hospitality is all about cooking. It's all about entertaining. And so it's important to have a chef jacket for our students so when they're out entertaining, they can highlight the brand. Now, as you probably know, we have an incredible PGM program here run by Dr. Chris Kane. And Chris Kane likes to always talk about the golf game that you drive for show and you putt for dough. And here in the kitchen, what we like to talk about is you have one jacket to show and then one jacket to dough, which is to cook. Because when you're entertaining your guests, you don't want to come in with a messy coat. So what I've done is I'm going to take off this jacket and I'll be cooking in my chef jacket, which can get all dirty and everything like that. So thank you very much, Chef. One of the important things to always remember when you're cooking, you want to think of yourself as a surgeon. And what I always like to do before I begin cooking is I like to scrub in. So I'm just going to walk over for a second and wash my hands and scrub in. I'll be right back. And then because I'm never sure if I might have a minor cut on my hand, what I always like to do is cook with some just simple little gloves. So that way I'm sure that everything will be extremely clean. Now you don't have to do this, of course, but I think it's very important for cleanliness, especially in today's environment with COVID-19. So you've all received the menu, you've all received the recipes and everything like that in advance. And one of the things that I always like to do, and I learned this from Chef Mark, was really to think about having my mise en place. And what mise en place means, it's having everything out in front that I need. Now, mise en place is French. If you're not very good with your French, you can say mise en place, and it's the same idea. But we have everything out so we're not running around looking for things. So one of the things that's become so important in cooking is really the timing for everything. And before we start, I'd like just to take a minute to talk about how this dinner came about. And, I used to cook a lot. All through high school, all through college, I worked in food service. Started in the dish room, worked my way up to sort of like the chef's helper, really. And when I was working in the hotel business, I started doing a lot of dinner parties. And one of my favorite recipes was the dinner we're having tonight, which is the French onion soup served with Cornish game hen, stuffed with wild rice. And that's really the entree that, I met my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. She wasn't even my girlfriend, but it was someone I was interested in. So I invited her for a dinner party. This is what we cooked, or this is what I cooked, and we ended up getting married, and now we'll be married 38 years. So it's a great way to woe someone's heart. So we have everything organized out in front. And because the Cornish game hen takes the longest amount of time, what we like to do is sort of get everything started. So we've kind of already done some preparation so we can put the chicken and the Cornish game hen in the oven right away. So chef's going to help do that, but your oven should be preheated to about 375 degrees. And it's going to cook for roughly 20 or so minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the Cornish game hen now, and then we'll kind of deconstruct everything we did so that by the time everything's done, we'll be able to pull the chicken out, and you're not sitting at home waiting for 20 minutes while it's cooking. And again, if you have questions, please email them, put it on the chat box. Happy to answer any questions that you need. So that sound good, Chef?
That sounds fantastic.
So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stuff the rice, and we'll talk about how we made the rice in a few minutes. Now, we're going to stuff this by hand, putting it right into the bird. But what I understand is if you're doing this at home, and especially if you're doing it if you're cooking a turkey, there are bags that you can buy that you put the turkey and the rice, the stuffing in the bag, put the bag in, and it becomes easy to pull out. Because these birds are relatively small, we're just going to stuff it, and it's important to have a sous chef to help you hold the bird open. And we're just going to stuff this in. And some of you may be thinking, well, I'm worried about, is it safe to pre-stuff your birds before you cook them? And the answer to that is yes. And the reason for that is that because we're gonna make sure that the bird is cooked to at least, 185 degrees?
165.
165. So any kind of bacteria that happens to be in there gets taken care of. Now, one of the things that becomes important when you're stuffing a bird is to make sure that it gets tied off. And like a surgeon, the surgeon does the stuffing or does the operation, but he never does the suturing. And that's why I have my sous chef, because he's the suturer. And it really takes two people. And Chef, why don't you talk a little bit about what you're doing right now in terms of twisting the legs back?
Okay, so what we're doing right now is we're folding the wings under, and then we're also going to crisscross the legs here. And then if you would, you're going to tie those nice and tight.
And you just wrap it around a couple times. Yep. And the reason that we do it like this is because we want the bird to cook equally all the way through. If the bird wasn't tied up like this, then the wings and the legs might cook a little faster than the main part of the beef. So we just tie this off.
That's perfect.
I like to put a little bow sometimes.
There we are. So now, and again, what you can see is you have one nice, really solid mass, and that's perfect. That's what we want. That way everything will cook evenly. And now we're going to do a little bit of our oil.
Yeah. And what that does, the oil does, is it makes the skin nice and crispy. You can also use butter. I like to use a little bit of virgin olive oil. And then, of course, it's always important to put a little salt and pepper around it because, again, that helps add to the flavor when you're doing it. And so what I always do is I just take a little bit from in my hand and just kind of sprinkle it around so the bird looks covered in. I even like to get a little bit on the wings because sometimes those often get mixed. And then salt is very good because what salt does is it helps bring out the flavor. And you used to have to eat a lot of salt. Now they're always concerned about salt, but I still think it makes the food really taste perfect.
I agree.
So now they're all...
To the oven we go.
So to the oven we go. And again, we set the oven at about 375 degrees. So it's always good to have the oven started and warm before you put the bird in. So the oven's got to be hot. So if there, any questions so far about what we've covered? Maggie, do you see any questions? Or Charles?
No questions.
Candace?
No questions just yet, Dean.
Okay, no questions. Okay. So let's start. One of the things that becomes important is obviously the stuffing for the bird. Okay. Now there's a couple things you can do, and when I first started doing this, I basically just bought a box of wild rice. But what I realized was that kind of took the fun out of it. If you buy a prepackaged box. And what I also found out is that you get the crunchiness of the rice, but you don't get a lot of the flavors of other things going into it. So what we used to do, where I worked at the Middlebury Inn in Middlebury, Vermont, and one of the things the chef told me to start with what we call a mirepoix. I'm not pronouncing that. Mirepoix.
Yep.
Which is really carrots, onions, and celery. And so what we do first is we boil the water. No, the first thing we do, is we saute the carrots, the onions, and the celery. And we've already done that.
Yep.
So we sauteed those, and then we added some chicken broth to add some flavor. And then we cook the rice. We add the rice all into a pot with the chicken broth. Add the mirepoix, and then we cook it so that what happens is it's kind of a building up of the flavor, right? So by sauteing, we're adding some flavor. By adding the chicken broth, we're adding flavor. And then by adding the wild rice, we're adding all that flavor into the wild rice. We take that out, let it cool, and then we have it all set to go to put into the bird. Okay, so that's really the stuffing is really what I think differentiates the kind of the product we're serving tonight versus one where if you just took a box of wild rice and stuffed it in the bird. Because this way we're getting a lot of flavor, and really food, as Chef Mark will attest, is all about the flavor. Okay?
Yep.
So that's the wild rice. So of course our bird's in the oven. It's already starting to cook. And now what we want to do is we want to start thinking about the onion soup. And French onion soup is really, it's a great entree or great appetizer to have with the bird. Because what it does is it gets, you have a really good flavor of the onion, the beef broth, the cheese, as we'll talk about, and it really kind of settles nice on the palate so that when we're ready for the main course, which is the bird, it really just makes a great evening. And this is a perfect time also to bring out the wine with your friends so you can have a glass of wine while you're getting ready to serve the soup. But let's start making the soup right now. Does that sound good, Chef?
Fantastic.
Okay, so the first thing we want to do is, obviously onion soup would not be onion soup without the onion. So obviously we have to peel the onion and then, cut the onion in half. Now, an important part for the onion soup is how do we cut it, right? So the initial phase is you'd want to cut it this way, but that's not going to give you the nice kind of onions that you want in the soup. So what we do is we cut it this way. And Chef is going to be doing some demonstrations too. But basically you put the knife there. Be careful not to cut your fingers.
And here what we're really going for too is a nice even cut. The reason that we want even cuts is so that they cook evenly, but also so that they're the same size or similar size on the spoon.
Yeah, so you can see it's kind of come out very nice. So we just put these in our pan. And you can see how they're all nicely cut, where if they'd been cut a different way, it wouldn't be the same. Now, there's a great trick if you're cooking and you want to dice your chicken or dice your onion first. So our chef here showed me this great technique, which he's going to show you right now, on how to dice an onion that makes it just perfect.
So this is how we diced all of the vegetables, the mirepoix for the wild rice. A lot of people have difficulty with onions. They're not really sure how to approach it. So they end up doing a lot of this, which ruptures those cells, and then everyone ends up crying. Contrary to that, what we're going to do is the end of the onion where the stem is, we're going to place away from us. We're going to cut about 3/4 of the way through, and those are about 1/4 of an inch apart. So the onion is still intact. Moving it kind of towards the edge of the cutting board, I'm going to saw about, again, 1/4 of an inch, just like that. And now what we're going to do is cut just like this, and we get beautiful 1/4 inch diced pieces, just like that. And now, again, we have our even cut, and they cook evenly.
Yeah.
So.
And again, the important thing anytime we're cooking onions or cooking any kind of food is to make sure that we don't let the aroma evaporate before we start to cook it. And so sautéing is a lot about sealing the flavor into the items. So what we're doing now is we have our pan, we're heating up our pan, we put a little olive oil in so that we can begin to sauté the onions. So just take these, and I always like a lot of onions in my onion soup, and it's important to always be stirring so you don't burn some of the onions. So I like to cover just a little bit about the bottom. Got that, Chef?
Yeah, there we are.
Now, what I found that makes onion soup really, really good, of course, is we put sherry in it. And so I have some sherry that I take from my liquor cabinet. Now, one of the important things I've learned from Chef Mackenzie, or our food and beverage director, who's really an expert in wine, Dr. Murray Mackenzie, he said that it's always good to taste the sherry before you put it in your product because you want to make sure it's perfect. So he always also recommends that tasting sherry, it's important about the glass. So I happen to have a sherry glass, and I like to pour a little bit in, and I kind of look at it. I always look for the clarity. I kind of circle it around because I like to look for some little tails around the sherry. And then I whirl it around my mouth, and I always want to make sure that I've tasted it properly, so I always want to taste it again, and maybe again, and I think it's good for today. So then what I'd like to do is put some sherry into a cup, usually 2 or 3 tablespoons. So you can see I have a nice group of sherry right here. And then the first thing I do is I kind of pour it, and I don't pour it right in, but I kind of move it all around the pan so that way it spreads equally. And sometimes I think maybe there's not enough sherry there, so I just like to add a little more. And then sometimes it becomes important after you put the sherry in to make sure that it still tastes good. So I always like to have a little, to make sure that nothing went wrong between when I put it in and when I didn't. We won't do that now, but it's okay if you do. So what Chef is doing right now is we're really just stirring to keep it nice and spread throughout so that nothing burns. And you'll notice that you can see in there we have a nice little layer of sherry. And what we're essentially doing is, again, we're coating the onions with the sherry that adds some nice flavor. And of course, if you have a good, olive, oil, a virgin olive oil, that makes it really good. So we'll keep sharing that, stirring that. Okay.
And while these are cooking nice and slow there, Dean Stowe. Maybe you want to talk about how we're going to blanch the green beans.
Yes. So one of the things you often hear chefs talk about is blanching. And one of the things I learned early on in my career is that you want everything, timing in the kitchen is incredibly important. So you don't want some things done while other things are cooking. So what you want to do is when you have the time to do things, you almost do what we call partial cooking. So what I do is obviously I've taken my green beans, I've cut them up, washed them, made them ready to go. And then what I do is I put them into boiling water. And it's perfect. It's good to use some kind of spoon like this, because if you just throw the beans in, sometimes the water will spark back at you and you can get burned. So I just like to lay it right in there. And essentially what we're going to do by blanching is we're really cooking the vegetable for about 2 minutes. So I'll set my timer for about 2 minutes. And then what we'll do is we'll cook it for about 2 minutes, which is really partially cooking it. And then what we'll do is after it's partially cooked, I put together a bucket of ice and water, because what that will do is it'll automatically cool it down right away. So we probably have another minute or so.
Right, and with our blanching, as Dean Stowe mentioned, we're saving time. So if we wanted to do a lot of this preparation the night before, this would be a step that would save us a few minutes when we're going to saute those green beans. And one of the great things that Dean Stowe has set up here is a really large pot of water. The reason that we want that really big, large pot of water to blanch is because we want the temperature as hot as possible, so that when we add those green beans, we don't lower that temperature as much. This is really going to keep our green beans really vibrant and green, because as you know, Dean Stowe, what happens when you cook them too long or don't shock them in the ice water?
They become soft and you lose a lot of the flavor.
And you use a lot of the flavor and the texture, and then you also lose some of that vitamin and mineral content. So that looks fantastic.
This is about 2 minutes, and you can see it's got like kind of a nice glaze on it, which shows it's still very firm. And you just put it right in this cold water, and that just immediately cools it right down. And we're just going to let it sit there and cool down as we go back to our onion soup. And it's always important to turn off the hot water because you're not going to need it anymore. So we'll go back and keep stirring up the onions. And notice how the onions are getting nice and kind of brown. Can you see that okay? And this is where we begin now to think about, we add a little bit of butter.
And that's really going to help with that caramelization as well.
Yes. And you'll notice that we put the butter in a little later, because we really wanted the onions to get the flavor of the sherry and not get lost in the flavor of the butter. And it's important to always be stirring, because a lot of times you get talking and you forget, and then some of it burns. And I think you've all been to a restaurant sometimes where you'll have French onion soup where it has like a burnt flavor, and that's just because the chef wasn't paying attention to the onions. So I think that looks pretty good, right about, Chef?
Yep, maybe just one more minute. We're really close.
Yeah, and it's important if you do have a sous chef that you have a sous chef like Chef Mark, because he will make sure that there are no mistakes. And we're so fortunate to have Chef Mark, and really working the camera is Chef Steph. And Stephanie has been working with us for a couple of years at the college, and she's a real gem for someone who really is involved with Chef Mark, with hospitality catering. Dr. Murray McKenzie was in earlier today. He's really our wine and food expert. He helps us pick out the sherry, helped us pick out the glass, but he's also the person that would help us select the wine that would go well with this dinner. But because we were really focusing not so much on the wine, we were cooking on the entrees, we didn't suggest some wines.
All
so
right.
Now the onions are ready.
Great. So I'm going to add in some of our beef broth for you.
And again, you want to step away a little bit because you don't want it spurting up at you to burn you. It's very hot. Okay.
When you're golden brown, really nice, and some caramelization.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can really tell by looking at the onions. You might not have been able to see it through the camera, but you can just sort of take a look and see.
So that's essentially what we have in the pot right now, are some onions that are nice and golden brown. Get a good shot of that. Yeah, that's it. And this is just one we did a little bit earlier through the television.
Yeah.
And what do you think? We think we have enough broth?
I think we might add a little bit more broth.
Okay. And then I'm going to get us a couple tasting spoons so we can make sure we have the right flavor that you're happy with.
Yeah. And one of the most important things, and I know at home we become kind of lazy, where we just grab a spoon out of our soup, our spoon bin. We take the soup, taste it, put it down, and then we put the spoon back in the soup and taste it again. Always important either to have little tasting things or use something separate, because really we don't want to pass on germs. I think it's very good. It might need a touch more sherry, so I like to put a little more sherry into my sauce. But I think, Chef, it's at the right thing. So we let this kind of cook for a few minutes to just kind of get the broth hot, but also to have the flavor from the onions, from the sherry, from the butter, all of it kind of come together to make a nice sauce.
Stowe, something that you mentioned earlier that I thought was a really fantastic idea was to have your beef broth hot. So when we added that beef broth to our soup, it was already hot.
Yes.
Instead of from the refrigerator. So that was really smart, and also saved us a lot of time.
Yeah, and again, the important thing is that I'm a type of person who I hate cold food. I like my food very hot. And what happens is if we take a hot food and put a cold food to it, just by temperature-wise, it's naturally going to lower the temperature. This keeps everything nice and hot. Okay? So I think that's probably another minute or so. And you can see how we're getting a nice sort of brownish broth. That's from the beef, but you can see the onions are coming in, and it's starting to sort of simmer around the side. We don't want it to boil, but we just want it to get a nice simmering.
Right.
Okay.
And then all those flavors marry, and you get everything to kind of interact together. So that's definitely our.
And I'm just going to stir this up a little bit. So I think it's looking pretty good. What do you think, Chef?
I think we're looking great. Yeah.
Okay.
I think maybe while we let that simmer for just a moment, we can come over and we have all of your mise en place ready for your soup. So you have your soup bowl, the croutons that you made a little bit earlier, and then some of our Gruyere or Swiss cheese. Mm-hmm. And so we'll get that ready. You want to show everybody how we do our garnish?
Yeah, so what I like to do is take some of the garnish and kind of put it in a very tight little bowl. Or not bowl, but a little, you can see how tight it is. And then what we want to do is we want to cut it up so we get some nice little pieces. And again, it's always important to watch how you're cutting because you never obviously want to cut yourself. So I keep my fingers close to the knife, and Chef is much better at knifemanship than I am. But basically what I've done is we've cut it up, and so now we have a nice area of garnish.
There we are.
So here you can see the difference between an expert and a dean is the expert is perfect, the dean not so perfect. So Chef, maybe you can tell the audience what I did wrong.
I don't necessarily think you did anything wrong there. I think it's just a matter of when you get that little bundle is really just cutting a julienne or a really thin chiffonade as small as you can, and then just run your knife over it just a couple times like that. And this way, you get nice even pieces. So it's almost like snowflakes.
Yes.
Really similar in the size and shape. And that way when we put that garnish all over our food, we're going to get really nice dispersion and really good color.
Yes.
So we'll put those right in there for now.
And so I did make up my croutons earlier. And croutons, you can buy them obviously pre-made, but what I find is really fun is to buy some nice bread and cut the bread into crouton sizes, cook them, kind of broil them in some olive oil, turning them around, adding a lot of salt, a lot of pepper, a lot of garlic. So by making your own, you can add really your own flavor. And so I made those earlier today, and I just let them sit out and cool. I'm a big Caesar salad fan, so I always make more than I need for the soups, and then I can have them for my salad later on.
All right, I think you're ready to go.
So I think we're ready to
put your pot right there. You can ladle that right into.
And it's important to put your pot, obviously, on something that won't burn your countertop.
There we are.
Now, one thing that's important to notice is we're using Swiss cheese. But it really doesn't matter what kind of cheese you like. When I was doing this as a dinner party, I would often ask my guests what kind of cheese did they like. And I would give them Swiss cheese, cheddar cheese, or Gruyere. And I'd have them choose what kind of cheese they like most. And then that's how I made my onion soup. And so what it did is it kind of made people feel extra special that I was able to give them something that they might not have had on their own. Because I didn't want to look at like I was just doing, production cooking. I really wanted to show that I was being individualized. And we lived in Vermont, so my wife loved Vermont cheddar cheese. So that's how I made hers. But then we lived in Switzerland at one point in our life, and she fell in love with Gruyere cheese. So when I make this at home now, I use Gruyere cheese. So you'll notice that I'm sort of pouring this into the cup. And when I was younger, one of the big things, everybody made onion soup. So you used to be able to buy onion soup, little crops with the top. But the reality is, this is perfect. So then what you do is you put your croutons in. And what I like to have a lot of croutons because I'm kind of a crouton guy. But what it does is it becomes kind of like a bedding for your cheese. So I put this in here. Now, sometimes restaurants will just take a piece of bread and put the onion soup over the piece of bread. I prefer to use croutons because it's much easier for your guests to eat. And if you've ordered, French onion soup in a restaurant, it's very awkward as you try to cut the bread with your spoon. And usually what happens is your soup goes all over and it's very embarrassing. So by using smaller croutons, it becomes very easy to eat. And I like to kind of layer the cheese so that it'll melt nicely. I use like 4 pieces of cheese depending upon the size. And you can see how I've kind of layered it. And then I put one right over the center. So now we have a nice cup of soup, lots of pieces of croutons covered with some bread. And I also like to make sure that the cheese kind of hangs over a little bit over the bowl. And the reason that is because when it cooks, then the cheese melts around the bowl. And one of the fun things to do in a restaurant is you can sort of pick the cheese off around the bowl and you get a really good flavor. So I'm just going to pull my cheese apart a little bit and just add some things around the side. Okay, then we take this, and I always cook it on a tray because the first time I made it, I didn't. The soup tends to boil over, and then you spend hours cleaning your oven. So by putting them on a tray, makes it a lot easier.
Perfect.
So give that to my sous chef.
The Cornish game heads are about 5 minutes away.
Okay.
So we're looking good there.
Yeah, and so notice how the timing has been working out perfectly. The Cornish game heads are done, just about. They'll be done around the same time as the soup, so we can start taking everything out. So everything is kind of coming along very nicely. Now we want to use this time now to kind of get ready to saute our vegetables. So I'm going to come over here and bring my pan. I'll turn my oven on, my stove.
That's the right one. You just have to. There we are.
Okay. And one of the fun things about cooking in Hospitality Hall is we have incredible cooking equipment. And I'd like to thank Well-Built, which is one of the largest manufacturers of kitchen equipment. So Well-Built, when we were building Hospitality Hall, they said that they would be willing to donate most of the cooking equipment to us. So we're working on a U.S. range, which is made by Well-Built. And you go into most commercial kitchens, and this is what you find.
And Dean Stowe, if that pan starts to get hot, there's a towel for you.
Okay, and I put a little olive oil just along the bottom here, so I get ready to blanch the beans. Sometimes I think a little sherry also adds to the flavor of the beans, so I just kind of pour that in. You can see I'm a sherry person. Now we just take our beans, and they've come out of the hot water, the cold water, so they're about halfway cooked. And now we start adding them in. So I just kind of pile them in right away. And once I get them in, then I'm going to start stirring them in a few minutes. So spoon, thank you, Chef. And you can hear it's kind of cooking a little bit. That's the olive oil. It's the kind of browning of the beans. Now, sometimes if you want to cook them a little faster, you can put a cover on top of the beans, which will act as kind of a little steaming. But I tend to just kind of like to stir them and not use the cover, because if you have the cover, then you have to clean the cover. And I like to not have a lot of things to clean afterwards. Okay. What I'd like to do also is I like to put a little salt and pepper on the beans while I'm sauteing them, because I think it helps bring out the flavor. Would you agree, Chef?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, and when you blanched your green beans in the large volume of water, we also like to put a lot of salt there, too. That way you're kind of getting some of that seasoning inside. So I think you've got a good mix there.
And then here we have some garlic.
Yes, minced garlic.
So we minced some garlic earlier, and I like to put some of that in because, again, that nothing adds better than garlic. It's also good, it keeps vampires away.
I think a little bit of sherry helps with that.
A little bit of sherry helps with it.
And it's good to add that garlic now while your green beans are already starting to cook. That way they don't. That way the garlic doesn't overcook and your green beans not be cooked. So you added it in the perfect time.
And you can tell that what's nice about cooking the garlic with these beans, when your guests come in to eat, they smell the onions, they smell the green beans, they smell the garlic, and their palates automatically start to get excited, and that's what we like to do. So one of the questions is you always have to be careful not to overcook the beans, right? We spend all that time blanching them, and what we don't want to do is overcook them when we're sauteing. I tend to like my vegetables a little harder than softer, so I tend probably a little bit to undercook them because I like to have the crunchiness. And I think, with this entree, because the onions are cooked, they're going to be very soft. It's nice to have something that you can sort of bite into and gives a little flavor. And that's what's so great about our rice, our stuffing, is that we have the onions, we have the carrots, so you're really getting a bunch of flavors. Okay, I think that looks about done, don't you think, Chef?
Oh, you're perfect. Yep.
So I turn off the other.
Yep, set that right.
And I set that over here.
So we're going to check our game pan.
And you always have to be careful that once you take stuff off the oven, they're still cooking. So it's very good if you have a sous chef to help sort of stir so that you're not burning things. Okay, make sure your stove is turned off. Now, you'll notice that chef is using a thermometer to test the temperature of the chicken or the Cornish game head. And I think it's, one of the things I'm so concerned about is food safety. And so it's important not just to kind of look at them or cut them open to see if the juice is clear, but we highly recommend using a thermometer because then you know exactly that the bird has been cooked to the right temperature, and you'll get rid of any pathogens that happen to be in the food. Which nowadays, of course, with processing everything, we don't have to worry about it like we did in the old days. But healthiness is very important. So using thermometers is really great to do. And you'll notice that chef has a thermometer, and most really good chefs carry thermometers right in their pocket. They take it off, then they sanitize it. So he put it in, he tested it, took it out, cleaned it, sanitized it, and so when he goes to put it back in, it's all clean, because you never want to transfer, bugs or germs. So I think this is pretty much stirred. It stopped cooking, so I think it's ready to go.
It smells fantastic too. All that garlic smells really great.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions at all from those that are watching? And again, I'm really excited to be part of this Cook Like a Rebel. I really want to thank Maggie, who is in charge of our career services and alumni, who's really doing just a phenomenal job in terms of really creating this whole series. Again, I want to thank Candace, who works with us, works with Maggie, but also helps with hospitality catering. She's phenomenal in terms of organizing everything. Chef Steph, who's behind the camera, Chef Mark, who's here, and really just the whole team at the college. And, if you haven't been back to Hospitality Hall in a long time, I encourage you to come and see the building, see the campus, talk to students. This fall, what will happen is about 60% of our classes will be taught remotely because of COVID-19, and the other classes will be taught on campus. And what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be teaching a class in the fall. I'll be teaching strategy, which is HMD 454. And if I have a class of like 40 students, they'll put me in a classroom that's with 80, so that way we can have social distancing. But we're really excited to have the students back. We're going to do more and more things to keep our students engaged while they're away. So now the birds look pretty done.
And we're going to, we'll let those rest for just a minute, but you got beautiful golden color. The internal temperature right now is about 158. So a lot of people get a little nervous and say, well, wait, 158, we need to go to 165. What's happening right now is that carryover cooking. So almost like on Thanksgiving, when that little thing pops out of the turkey, that's when it hits 165 internal degrees, which kills all that salmonella and all that bacteria that we don't want. Well, then what happens when you let the turkey rest is then it carries up to about 180 or 185, and it tends to dry out. So what we're going to do now is twofold. Let those game hens rest for a moment. By doing so, the internal temperature is going to go up to about 165 or 168, and but it's also resting, so all those juices are going to run back in, and now we're going to have a beautiful, juicy bird. In the meantime, I'm going to check our soup. It looks like it's just about ready.
And see by putting the sort of the olive oil and all that around the bird, the salt and pepper, you get that nice flavor. Now take a look at the way the onion soup, and notice how the soup, oh, it is very hot. You have to be careful. I just burned myself. Notice how around the edges some of that cheese is kind of hardened around the side. It's still kind of bubbling a little bit. So it's the perfect temperature. A little hot. We want it to cool down, but it's just at the right thing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And we'll set this, again, we're going to set that there. And then something that's really important that we don't want to forget is that string that we tied on there,
right.
The truss. So what we're going to do now is I'll just remove those from both. That way we know that someone's not going to get a little string in there with their game hen. There we are. And we're going to grab our tongs.
And what makes, you could obviously do this with a small chicken, but chicken is something that everybody serves. A game hen is it's different. Not many people buy game hens and cook them at home. and that's why I've always served them for my dinners. And you know, you could either do a couple things. One, it can give one person each game hen, or if you have some light eaters, it becomes very easy to cut the bird in half. So if you want to give someone the full bird, I think it looks nice to have the full bird right there. But if you want to cut it in half, Chef's going to show you how to do that in a way that splits the bird nicely in half.
All right, so we took the truss off there. The breastbone is going to run right down the center. So we're going to go just slightly to the side of that. And then what we're going to do is just kind of crack through that bone there. There we are. And then crack through the backbone.
So then you split it.
And now we have a little bit of the color there.
Yes.
And if you want to put those green beans.
Yep. So now what we do is
Really good.
yeah, so I like actually cutting it in half because then it makes it, I mean, that just looks like a very, very nice way to look at it. It's easy for your guest to take it. And then what we do is we put a little green beans on the side. And I like to use green beans because now we have some nice color, right? Food is all about the color. We have some nice color with the rice, we have the white chicken, and we have some nice set of green beans. There you go, Chef.
Beautiful. There we are.
So that is the meal that made my wife fall in love with me. And it's just a great thing. Now, of course, we want to garnish it. So I like to put a little on the bird, the rice, or the green beans. And
Voila.
voila. Are there any questions at all?
Anyone have any
Well, it's
questions
really
they'd
been a
like to
pleasure.
ask
I
the
want to
dean?
thank Chef for all his help and support. I think we might have a question.
No questions just yet. Everybody's just talking about what a great job you two have done and that you need your own show.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Candace. And thank you all for participating and giving up your Friday night to learn how to cook something a little different. And we hope you had fun. And oh, yes. Can we what? Absolutely. Yeah. So you can, the question is, can you pre-cook the soup? And the answer is obviously yes. You can get the soup all made, cook it. What I'd like to do is get everything ready, but just have it hot, but then just put the broth, put the croutons and the cheese in just to kind of heat that up, because when you cook it like this and then make it cold and then try to reheat it, you don't get the same flavor for the cheese. So what I would do is you make the soup all up, the broth, put it in the refrigerator maybe the day before. Then when you're ready to cook it, take it out, heat the broth up again, put your croutons and put your cheese in, and you've saved a bunch of time.
And that's a really good time to share wine and
Yes.
good stories and have your first course while your game hen's in the oven.
Yes.
Yeah. It's all about timing. It's like Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Making sure everything comes together.
Yes. So
I don't see any other questions just yet.
okay. Well, we hope you all stay healthy. We hope you have a great weekend. We hope you have a great 4th of July that's coming up. And thank you, for being part of this tonight. But more importantly, thank you for your support of UNLV, the College of Hospitality. Yesterday, Alex Liebman, who runs our enrollment services, with some of our alums, we did a kind of a town hall for freshmen and transfers who were thinking to come to UNLV, and it was just really exciting that here were these kids who were like you a long time ago when you first thought about studying hospitality. And, you know, it was just really inspiring. And, you know, one of the things we talk about a lot at UNLV and the College of Hospitality is we're really doubling down on operations. We want to be the school that if you want to go into hospitality, any aspect of hospitality, you'll come here because you'll get lots of hands-on experience working with our mentors, our great faculty, et cetera, here in the hotel college. And before we close, I'd like Chef just to talk a little bit about something we're doing that's really exciting, I think, in terms of what we're doing with the athletic department.
All right, well, thank you. Currently, we are overseeing and managing the training tables for all of our student athletes. So we were kind of full bore and full head of steam this last spring, and then shut everything down in March. And now we're back again, and we have a new chef at the Ifthe Football Training Center, Chef Mark T. And so Chef Stephanie, myself, and Chef T are now providing grab-and-go meals for all of our football teams. And shortly we'll start to see our soccer and men and women's soccer come back. Basketball is back. And then in the fall, we'll go back to hopefully feeding all of our student athletes food and cuisine that is helpful for their performance, something to fuel their performance. So it's awesome for us. When we get our students back, it's an amazing opportunity for our students to get practical experience and also build that camaraderie with athletics and with all of the athletes here at UNLV. So something that's just amazing. We're really excited.
Yeah, and I can't thank you enough because it really shows that athletics is not separate from the university, but it's really part of the university, and we're excited about that. Now, you've noticed I put on my red chef jacket again because we show for dough. You know, we show for we put on for show, we cook for dough. And so now when I serve my dinner, I have the UNLV, I have the red coat, and as an alum, we encourage you to buy one of these, because what you're doing by not only buying one for yourself is we're creating a fund to pay for a chef jacket for that student who graduates. And just imagine if you had graduated from UNLV and had received your chef jacket, you'd be serving all your meals in the future with your UNLV. And we hope it reminds you of your time here and how much fun you had, the friends you made, the knowledge you made, and how we really helped launch your career. And Maggie has all the information on these red chef jackets. We put your name on it, the College of Hospitality. So with that, Chef.
Very sharp.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you,
nice
Steph.
job.
Thank you, Charles, our head of alumni. Really appreciate that. Doing a great job. Charles was a student of mine before I became dean, and we still laugh about that class.
Yes.
About how much fun we had. Correct?
Well, yes, definitely. So I'll take it from here now. So thank you, chefs. Yeah, thank you, chefs, so much. That was fantastic. And like, I'm going to call him Chef Stowe now, after seeing all of that, is that you can now get one of those chef's coats. So we've had so many people say, hey, I graduated before that was a tradition. I want one too. So now you can get one and also be able to donate one to one of our graduating students. So there will be a link in the chat on the side there. So make sure to click that link if you would like to get a chef's coat for yourself and also be able to donate one to one of our graduates. Make sure you click that link. So you can see now what's coming up here. We have Salute Prost Cheers coming up on July 18th. We're going to be doing whiskey and scotch with Dr. Murray McKenzie. So if you were with us for the very first Salute Prost Cheers, Dr. Murray McKenzie did some wine tasting for that one. This one, he's going to be doing some whiskey and scotch. So make sure you join us July 18th for that. And then August 22nd, we have another Salute Prost Cheers. We're going to be doing Cocktail 101. And also in there, we'll be doing another Cook Like a Rebel event. So make sure that you watch our social media, watch your email, because that's where you're going to see what's going to be coming up next for our Salute Prost Cheers and our Cook Like a Rebel event. So once again, Thank you, chefs, for cooking that wonderful meal tonight. So you see our social media there, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter at UNLV Hospitality or UNLV Hospitality Alumni. So hopefully everybody is eating right now. They've got their French onion soup, they've got their Cornish game hen, and they're starting to eat that right now and have a wonderful meal on this Friday evening. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon.